Okay. First thing you got to know is this is my first time in front of a microphone. I'm 60-some years old, haven't done this before, so I apologize for how clumsy things might get from time to time, but y'all gonna have to bear with me. I'd like to call the meeting to order formally at 9:04 a.m. Saturday, 20th August. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Military training doesn't support the
All right. I'd like to introduce the folks on the board right now. Some of us appeared last year. There's a lot of people that were brought in over the course of the year. We can get to that a little later. If people's got questions about, how that came to pass. But I'll start on my left. Jan Ferenz joined the board by appointment approximately 2 months ago.
Mine's standing, we can't see from back.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Mickey Hannon joined the board roughly in January or so.
January, yeah.
By appointment. Terry Bowen is on the board as an elected person from last time around, as is Roger Benvenuti, the vice president. Myself, I'm David Adams. I'm currently the president. There's Sharon Francis, who was appointed in January, I believe.
Yes.
And she is now the secretary. And Terry Sinkler is now the treasurer for a grand total of 2 weeks or so. So she's new to the board and new to the job, and but she's catching up real fast. There's one other person I want to make mention of, who is our assistant treasurer, a non-board member assistant treasurer, Marcy Hayes, and she's in the back there. So she's also been in the position less than a month or so. So the treasury aspect of our board is relatively new, although it was kind of brought about under my stewardship because of my background. So we're in the process of turning the books and records keeping over to the new people. So I'd like to get into the agenda. The first item on the agenda, well, let me talk about printed materials very quickly. Over there, if you didn't see them, there's a financial statement and agenda for tonight, or today. And there's 2 other documents there. If there's a problem, and there has been problems with record keeping over the last few years in terms of updated member information, if you're having any problems at all with getting invoices or getting emails or anything at all, or records having to do with your property assessment, the number of lots, the records need to be updated, and if you have any anomalies at all, please fill out an update sheet, and we will get that going. And the last thing that's over there is copies of the survey we sent out with the invoices. If you lost it or didn't send it in, we'd really encourage you to please fill out the surveys, get us your information, get us your opinions, because this board, or any board that follows, really can't do its job if we're not listening to you and finding out what you want to see happen on this lake. Volunteerism, you're going to hear it a few times, volunteerism is weak on this lake. All of you here do not generally represent that, because at least you're here. But the one thing I learned in the last year is it's very hard to get competent people to do this job and to let us know what you want. If you don't let us know what you want, if you don't fill out the surveys, we don't have our guidance. So we would really appreciate that. The next 2 items are formalities, and it brings to the point, frankly, a little bit of the problem we've had in the past and the problem we might have right now. We have a preliminary count of ballots, yellow ballots, given out at the counter here of a little less than 100. We have proxies in the file, net of the returned ones that were returned in exchange for the ballots you've received, of another 70 or 80. We need a quorum to hold this meeting of 191. So what we're going to do, because we can't certify that this is even enough people to hold a meeting, we are going to hold the meeting. We're going to keep the agenda rolling, but you need to be aware that if we do not have a quorum, the election is not going to be certified. So there's a couple ways to deal with that. One way to deal with that would be to adjourn the vote, and we would continue as a board with the appointees, or we can hold the vote open for a period of time, call it 24 or 48 hours, in order to get enough over the top to meet our bylaws. Because an election that doesn't have a quorum isn't an election. So I'm prefacing the balance of the meeting with that. Every single ballot that's out there and every single proxy we receive is going to be considered, but if it's not enough, we've got an issue. That said, we're going to hold the meeting and as if we've got a quorum, and we'll deal with it if we don't. Okay. My first thing I'd like to do is acknowledge a few people and their efforts. We've had some volunteers that did some really nice work on the parks. I'd like to thank all the volunteers all summer that stepped up and did that sort of thing. I'd like to thank the former board, the prior boards, for their efforts, because this is not an easy job. I think everybody in the past, notwithstanding the trouble that we've had as a board or as an association in the past, they were probably doing the best they can, and it's still not. There's a lot of things that still need to be fixed up, and we're working on that. I'd like to thank a couple people who served on the board that left. Tracy Lawrence, Sharon Andre, Kathy Schmaltz, Brian Wachuk. There were a lot of comings and goings this year, and I know that concerned a lot of people. I can tell you that most of the people departing the board did so because they moved off the lake. Barbara D'Onofrio also. Yes, and a couple other people left for personal reasons, but the point is there's been a lot of turnover, and it's hard to get competent people to begin with, and if there's turnover, it just makes those transitions more difficult. So that's been going on, and we're working through those things. I'd like to also let anybody know who's got a phone on. God. Yeah. I'm going to let turn the microphones over to Terry and Sharon. They've got some general discussions about the smaller events that they'd like to cover. So Terry, you're up.
So hi, I'm Terry Vaughn. I don't know if this mic is picking up.
It works.
Is it working fine? So I'm an avid fisherman, and when I joined the board, I heard that the association used to do a fishing contest, but hadn't done it in a while. And so this year, I wanted to bring that back. Just seeing the fish that are caught is interesting to see how the lake is doing from a fishery perspective, and seeing the joy of a young kid holding a very large fish is also satisfying. So this year we held a fishing contest. I have the pictures up on the wall. At the break, if you get a chance, go on over and take a look. Because it's amazing, especially the young folks that participate. Just to let you know, so the rules were we kind of, we wouldn't go outside of Michigan fishing laws, because you're not supposed to keep a fish out of the water for a long time if the fish is not in season. So we started the Friday before Memorial Day weekend, and we ended this last weekend. And we did get some last minute entries. And we did that for the reason of being able to do this, be able to recognize people and show what they caught. You had to be a Lake James or Shadow Lake property owner or a relative. So a lot of relatives, family members that were up, participated in that. And the way the fish was decided was on the length. So they had to send in a picture of the fish on a ruler, or and the tiebreaker, if we had fish that were the same length, was if they were able to have a scale and weigh the fish as well. We had a few different categories. Our lake is full of bass, so bass was the first category. Our lake is also full of pike, and sometimes you're not interested in catching those. We've got a lot of panfish, so sunfish, bluegill, rock bass even. I didn't realize rock bass was a panfish, and we had rock bass entered, and I did the research, and it's a panfish, and they can be quite big. And then we did a couple other species for crappie. You don't see a lot of crappie caught on our lake, but we had plenty submitted, and walleye. I didn't originally have walleye as a species because I think I've only seen one picture of a walleye. It's not native to our lake. It doesn't reproduce in our lake, but it's been stocked. And we had 2 huge walleye submitted this year. And take a look at the picture. So out of my pocket, I bought some trophies to recognize, especially for the younger kids, and medallions. So I have those with me today. So if you are a relative, the kids aren't here, but if you're a relative and you want to take a trophy back to them, or you won as well, see me after the meeting. For adult bass, that'll be the first picture. Dave Krug caught a 20-inch, 5-pound largemouth out of our lake. You don't have to clap to everything, but that is a really nice largemouth. From the youth bass, we had 3 submissions, and the second picture is Henry Tyrish. He's 8 years old. He caught an 18 3/4-inch bass, 3 pounds. Easton McGee, a 7-year-old, caught an 18.5-inch bass, 2.5 pounds. And Isaac Rome, age 6, caught a 16-inch bass.
Nice.
Let's see. When we went to pike, the rules on pike kind of changed this year because we worked with the DNR to lower the limit so we could start to reduce the amount of pike we have. We did have 1 submission for pike. At age 77, Marilyn Krug caught a 29-inch, 4-pound pike. And you can see the pike. She didn't want to put her fingers near the mouth. Dave Krug, so panfish, adult panfish. I see Dave on the lake all the time, so it wasn't surprising that Dave caught some good fish, as well as his wife. He caught a 9.5-inch bluegill. Youth panfish, Easton McGee caught a 10 3/4-inch rock bass. He's 7 years old. And Isaac Rome caught a 8-inch bluegill, and he's 6 years old. Crappie, Jim Card said he doesn't fish a lot, and he doesn't fish for crappie often, but he caught a 12-inch, and he's 74 years old. He caught a 12-inch crappie. Youth, Olivia McGee, she's 5 years old. She caught an 11.5-inch crappie. And then, because we had submissions for walleye, I added that category. This family knows what they're doing. If you want to learn how to catch walleye in our lake, talk to the Romes if they're here. In back-to-back weekends, the first weekend, Isaac Rome, age 6, caught a 19-inch, 3-pound walleye. The next weekend, his sister, who's 4 years old, Annie Rome, caught a 21-inch walleye. And she couldn't be happier in that last picture. So if you did win, or you're a neighbor of somebody and you want to deliver a trophy or a medallion, stop by and see me afterwards. Thanks.
Thanks, Terry. Sharon Francis would like to cover a few things that over the past picnic and parade season. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. This year was kind of new for me, coming on the board in January, and having assigned taking on the picnic and the parade. Thanks to Mary Jo and some of her insights from past years, we were able to pull those off. The picnic was a complete non-expense to the association. Had it not been for our donations, which you'll see on our banner on the wall there, I have to say thank you to Graphics Galore, Paul and Nancy Durant. I could have not pulled this picnic off without them. Paul and Nancy donated 100 t-shirts out of their graphics company to sell, with 100% profit going to the association. So I know Paul and Nancy are here, but I do have a certificate of appreciation for them, and I will deliver that to them personally. We were able to, with their donation, cover all the expenses through the sales of the t-shirts, which we still have a few shirts here for sale. The next person I would like to acknowledge and thank is Rick from Extreme Landscaping, another member of our association. Rick's generous, very generous cash donation was affordable to allow us to provide food at the picnic this year. So Rick, if you're here, please come up and accept this. If you're not, I'll deliver it. Corinne Prey and Rob Prey, members of the association, as well as owners of Cabinetry Concepts, their cash donation also helped us provide food and beverage to the picnic. Thank you. Bar S Foods. Is Dante here? Okay. Dante Spagnola from Silverwood Drive donated 150 hot dogs and buns so we could serve and have food for the picnic. I want to thank you, really, for all of your donations. And then we have Mr. Lake James. I think we all know him from Mint and Company. He was so generous, and he helped with setup, and he purchased all the beverages, the pop, the water, the ice, everything for the picnic. And thank you so, so very much. And then, you know, we had to bring our own chairs, but thanks to the Houghton Lake Chamber, we were able to provide tables at no cost with Easy Ups. So it was a community effort, as you can see. Now, some of you may use this company already, Bug Busters. They're a great company. They're out of Davison, I believe. And they sprayed Moosehead Park for us so that we wouldn't get bee bitten or stung during our picnic. And they did it gratis, no charge. So for our picnic, we were able to meet with our neighbors, and I understand the date was probably not the best date in forever, but we were able to sit and visit. We were able to talk to one another and get to know one another. And that was our goal. And we did it all at no expense to the association. In keeping with the budgetary restraints that we had this year, we had several volunteers that went out to our parks and cleaned up our parks. And that was an effort through Kathy Schmaltz when she was on the board, and the folks that she kind of pulled into her little team. I do want to recognize a couple here today, Pat and Sue Crawford, if you could come up, please. And I want to give you the certificate as a thank you. Pat and Sue purchased the sand and spread the sand for the parks at Linwood Park out of their own pocket. And thank you so much.
Jeff and Lee Johnson.
Yes, they did.
So,
Okay, thank you. So we're working very hard to keep things tight on the budget, and we look for your volunteers to help us do all of this next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. So we're going to move on to the meat of the meeting now, and the meeting, as it proceeds from here on out, is divided into two parts. The first part is the election, and the first part of that first part is that I would like to introduce the candidates that are on the ballot to the extent that they're here. Each of them will have an opportunity to talk for a couple, 3 minutes. We ask that they keep it pretty limited, a couple, 3 minutes, introduce yourselves. And if there's any questions of those candidates, I'll allow some time after all of them have been allowed to speak, and then they can answer direct questions to some extent. So I'd like to start with, there's 6 candidates obviously on the ballot you saw. First one is Terry Stinkler, and she has been appointee for about a month. She's been treasurer now for a couple weeks, but she's also running for the seat. So it's more about a candidate situation now. So go ahead.
Hi, Terry Sinkler. I'm a software engineer by trade, but I've done a lot of accounting. I also run the accounting for the firm I work for. I volunteered, I think on my little thing, PTA, bowling leagues, everything, secretary, treasurer. I just like doing stuff like that and help out where I can. And I don't really have much else to say. Oh, we've been here since March of 2018. We bought our place and hoping to move up here when we retire. Hopefully.
Thanks, Terry. Actions speak louder than many words anyway. Next up would be Jan Ferenz at the other end. Jan's got a background, and I'm going to let her talk about that as well.
So everybody can hear me? I'm usually real loud. I have been coming to Lake James since the early 70s when my parents built a cottage on Hazelwood. I do live in Southgate. I've been very involved with my community. I've served on boards and commissions. I served 8 years as city council member, and I am currently the city clerk. I've also been employed for over 22 years as an office manager for a law firm. I believe that this board is doing a great job for the first year that they're trying to get everything together and moving forward from here. I know that everybody in this room, I'm sure, the top priority is the health of the lake. Another thing we all probably agree on is we need to do the bylaws. We definitely need bylaws that are not obsolete. So I do have the time and the desire to be part of the Lake James Community Board. So thank you. I hope that was in a nutshell.
Thanks, Jan. Sharon Francis, even though she's got a pretty hefty position already by appointment, is actually on the ballot as well. So she's going to probably want to say a few words.
Hi, my name is Sharon Francis, again. I was appointed in January. I've enjoyed my appointment by working on the picnic parade, speaking to many of you, just passing by. I am here full-time. I retired in January. We look forward to serving on the board again. We've got a lot to accomplish yet, and I'd love to still help. If you have any questions, please come and see me.
Thanks, Sharon. There's 3 other people on the ballot that are not up here right now, and I will mention their names, and if they'd like to step forward, they can do so and grab a microphone and introduce themselves. Mark Rumble is on the ballot, and I did think I saw Mark.
Yep, there he
Mark,
is.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Mark Rumble, my wife and I, we bought our first place up here, we moved in Memorial Weekend of 2018. We love the lake, we come up here as many weekends as we possibly can. I know the board has been struggling and we've got some work that needs to be done, so I volunteered that, if you guys want me on the board, I'm glad to try and help out. I also feel that I owe Terry Bone a donation, being that my grandkids didn't have.
See me afterwards.
Thanks, Mark. Next name on the list here is Tom Rose, and Tom, as I see him in the front row, I think he's got a couple things he wants to talk about.
Well, some of you folks know me. I've got my neighbor across the street, that's right over there. How you doing? Got a couple of things. Some of you may know me, maybe not. I used to be the treasurer of Lake Township. That's on the other end of Houghton Lake. You know where the state police post is? My place was about a block away from that, and that's where Lake Township starts. And it goes from there up to, well, next to Crawford County. Anyway, long story short, I got in a, well, I don't want to use the word I was going to use, to say an argument with the township supervisor. He and I disagreed on a couple of things, and he wound up charging me with embezzlement, which turned to be a bogus thing. And when it got to court, it was thrown out in less than 15 minutes. So that's a background. If you want to find out more about me, just ask. I own the place on Lake James Drive. If you've been down that road, I'm the one that's got the big barn next to the house with a red door. Can't hardly miss it. And I love it. My son and I got a car hoist in there, and we're having a ball. I kind of miss not being on the lake proper. But I got on the lake in the wintertime because my snowmobile goes like a bat out of hell going up and down that way. At any rate, I wanted to serve. I've been in politics for a long time. This is not really a political job, but I really enjoy being in this community. And I know you folks enjoy being in this community, and I'm really surprised, and I think it's great, the turnout at this meeting. It just shows that people do have an interest in their community and want to serve. So I think that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. The last name on the ballot is a former board member who could not be here tonight. He asked me to pass on that he's traveling with his grandchildren to Indiana right now. Mike Peterson used to be the treasurer a few years back. I'll just simply say he wanted to be here. He had prior commitments, but he's anxious to get back on the board. He sees a lot of optimism and forward movement, and I think that he's ready to get back on and serve. So with that, that covers the candidates. The next thing I'd like to say about candidates, though, is that we are taking floor nominations at this time for anybody that wants to nominate somebody who's in the room, if there's such a person. So this would be the time to step up and nominate yourself or nominate somebody you know. Don't everybody jump up at once. Okay, so we've got 6 candidates. We've met them. What I'd like to do now, before we get into ballot instructions, we've tried to keep the ballots very simple. But if you've got any questions about the ballots, feel free to come forth and ask. But we're going to take 10 minutes or so to fill out ballots and close the first part of the meeting. Well, actually, that's wrong. We're going to cover financial reports too before we do that. But the last piece before ballot instructions is, if anybody's got any questions of any of these candidates, please step up and ask them now. And I would ask the candidates to just address the answer the questions that are posed by the audience in a very brief manner. We don't have all day, but we want an opportunity, if you have questions, to ask direct questions of the 5 candidates that are here. So are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Pat Lowen. Isn't it, if there's only 6 candidates, those are the positions we have to fill, 6 people?
That's correct.
It's automatic, all right?
Unless we don't have a quorum, it's automatic. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Cindy Conway. When do the new members take office?
So the bylaws are not crystal clear on this. Last year, we took office literally right after the election in the back room. And I think if we go, based on any kind of precedent, I suppose there's an argument that says we take office immediately. I think, not to go down in the weeds, but I think that's a question for bylaws improvements. I think that probably what should happen is they take office a few weeks later and let the existing board wrap up business, because that was one of the problems we had last year. Yes?
My name's Michelle Castile. What positions are open out of for these 6?
Okay. The way the board is constructed is that there's 9 directors, and within the 9 directors, any given year, right after the election, the 9 that are in the room afterwards select the president, vice president, and the officers. So the way this board is constructed right now, you don't elect a president, you don't elect a secretary, and so on. That's selected internally. All you're doing is electing the 6 directors, or the 9 directors, or the 3, how many other openings there are. Is that answer?
Is there something in the bylaws that limits the number of people on the board?
The bylaws call for 9, a count of 9, and there has been some question about, is it a valid board when there's not 9? Of course you've got a valid board if there's less than 9, because otherwise you couldn't even appoint the 2 empty seats that you might have at any given time. But there is a call for 9, and there therefore is a duty of the remaining board members to do as best they can in the interest of the association to keep 9 seated. That's a challenge. But the short answer is 9 is what's called for.
What I'm suggesting is that anybody that wants to be on the board, if it's not an outrageous number, should be allowed. If they're willing to be on the ballot, that they should. And the members at the meeting are agreed to it, that we should approve the whole ballot.
So that's a bylaws issue, and I think what we should do, I think our secretary is doing a great job taking notes. She's a great note taker. I think we address this at the time we start to review the bylaws revisions. It's a consideration. Thank you. Yes.
Is this Pat Lowell again? Is this the year that we're going back on track? The officers serve 3 years. Anybody that was on the board now only serves 2. That should be the 3 of you guys. And then we still have to fill 3 for 3 years and 3 for 1 year.
Okay, Pat, what Pat's alluding to is there's a provision in the bylaws that call for a staggering, and it is unclear, frankly, in the bylaws. There's an interpretation that I believe is correct, that was for just the first year. Although, I will tell you, there's a good argument to create a much clearer provision in the bylaws to do just that. In other words, we might want to stagger things so that we don't have 6 people in any given year. I think it's a great suggestion, but frankly, the bylaws are not very clear on the staggering of directors' positions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're talking about changing bylaws and stuff, which is obviously needs to be done. When are we going to get a chance as membership to be able to look at the proposals and vote on them, what's the procedure?
Yeah. So the question is, when and how will the provisions that are being proposed be considered by the membership at large? We are working toward getting a committee together, and that would be the first step. I think there's some people on the board that have a vested interest and a very strong interest in getting to the bylaws, because frankly that was one of the reasons I ran, is because I think the bylaws desperately need to be updated. So the short answer is we're working on it. I don't think that anything is going to happen without all the proposed changes being circulated to every member for their opinions. And there'll be a period of time where we'll keep comments open. It might be 2 or 3 months. I don't see a rush to changing the bylaws, but I see it as a high priority. Yes, Mary Jo.
A few years ago, someone ran and they didn't show up at the meeting, at our annual meeting. We all know when it's gonna be. I think if someone doesn't show up, I find it hard to vote for someone.
Yeah.
If you want that position, we all know this is when it's gonna happen, and what day it's gonna be.
Right.
And just like in this instance, they wanted to have that position, but they didn't even take the time to come here.
Right.
I really don't think someone who doesn't come here for our meeting should be allowed to run for the position.
Okay, let me suggest this. We're devolving into a conversation that's really reserved for later. These questions are all great questions, but they're not germane to the election at hand. The questions that I would like to leave one last opportunity for are to be directed at the candidates. Are there any questions remaining about the candidates or to the candidates? Okay, so let's do this. I think we're going to move on to closing. I'm sorry. We're going to move on to the financial reports. Okay, and Terry Sinkler, being the new treasurer, is going to take the first swipe at it. And if there's any real questions about it, she and I will do our best to answer everything right now.
Yeah, no, because I don't really have much to say.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to, I guess just, does anybody have any questions about where we're at?
The real question is, having seen the handout, are there any questions directly at the financial report?
Right,
Because
that's the best way.
my overview would be very brief. It would go something like this. We've got about the same balance in the account that we had last year, about $75,000 at the end of July. We have made no major purchases of equipment or fixtures or anything like that. And in terms of budget, it's a pretty simple situation, unfortunately. We take in about $90,000 to $100,000 a year. We spend about $60,000 to $65,000 presently on lake treatments. Unfortunately, insurance for the dam has gone from about $3,000 a year to just shy of $20,000. We can talk about that later. And so what you have is you've got a budget that is really constrained in terms of the bare essentials. And so we will take questions on that a little later to a greater degree. But if anybody has any questions about the financial statement itself, now would be the time to ask a question with regard to this. Yes, ma'am.
This is the first financial that I've read that we're in a negative figure. Why is that?
Where do you see a negative figure?
On the change, negative $82,000.
Balance sheet.
On the balance sheet. So you're talking about total assets.
Right.
Okay. If you look at the detail behind those assets, what you have is December 31st, cash of $135. And July 31st, you have cash of $75, right? That's easily explained, right? Think about it. We collect dues in the fall and in the winter. By the end of December, we have a larger cash pool. By the time July 31st rolls around, we have spent some of that money, as we do every year. The drop in net assets of 82 is insignificant in any kind of meaningful way. It simply means we have spent about $60,000 of cash, which you would expect to do in the first 6 months of the fiscal year. Does that answer the question?
Somewhat, but there's no details here to tell us what these expenditures
Okay.
cover.
On the website, we are doing quarterly reports right down to the check amount, check number, and date. Everything that is in these numbers is on the website. We can't distribute 8 to 10 pages to everybody here, but anything that is in here that you want to know what's in that number is on the website now. And we're publishing quarterly statements by detail. So what I say is go there first. If after you read those financials, if there's something that you're uncomfortable with or you need clarification on, call me or call Terry pretty soon because she's taking this position over. And Marcy Hayes is our assistant. And one of the three of us will give you an answer within, as quick as we can. Yes, sir.
I presume those numbers are as of the last fiscal year ending? And when is it? What date is that?
So the answer is not quite, because we changed our fiscal year this year, and I'm going to get into that later. But what you have here is a balance sheet as of the end of the calendar year, 21, and then numbers as of the last month year end. I mean, the last month end. Yeah. So it's a 7-month balance sheet change. In the future, it'll be an annual statement. But the reason we changed from a August 1st fiscal year is quite simple. It comes down to this. The operations of this organization is a calendar year, natural calendar year. It is very cumbersome and almost non-productive to have a year end for a lake association that ends in the middle of July. If you end your financial statements at precisely the moment when the most activity financially is happening, you can't capture what's really happening over a season or a true year. It's a much more difficult proposition. Let me give you an example. Last year I was here, and I asked this board, what was the number for late treatments? And was that an accrual number on the books? Nobody could answer. And the reason it's important is this. If I close the books on July 31st and I owe Savin $27,000, but I'm on the cash basis on a fiscal year, that doesn't appear anywhere in there. The fact that I owe that money, though, is very, very relevant to the financial concerns of that year. So we are a calendar year reporting entity now, which means from January to December is when we report, and that gives you the slowest time of the year to gather your books and get an accurate picture of what just happened this year. That's why we did it. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Does everyone who owns property on Lake James and enjoys the lake, do they all pay HOA? And how do you ensure that?
So, well, there's a lot of questions. There's three questions in there, but I'll try and be quick about it. Yes, everybody in the association has to pay dues. How you ensure that they pay is a matter of improving the bylaws in part, in my opinion, because right now, there's an argument, frankly, whether we can even lien a property, okay? That should be clearly spelled out in the bylaws. If somebody doesn't pay, it's a matter of deed right, frankly. Your certificate and your membership is not a normal club membership that you just buy. It goes with the deed to the property. So if it goes with the deed to the property, then we have to have an ability to track that, and we have to have an ability to collect on it. And the normal way to do it is the same way tax collectors do. They lien properties. That's where it should go.
You're talking about money that is very tight
Yes.
for the health of the lake.
Yes.
And so I guess I'm asking,
What do we do?
yeah, how do you ensure that you have the money to do what you need to do?
Well, how does any business ensure they have the money to do what they want to do? They have to go out and they do a few things. They either need to raise revenue or do a better job collecting it, and we're doing both of those things. It's a little premature to talk about dues increases, and I'll get to that later. But
Well, I'm not talking about increases,
I
I'm
know.
just talking about how do you ensure that everyone that enjoys the lake
Yeah.
and loves the lake and owns on the lake, that you don't have anything to ensure that they're contributing, is what you're saying.
No, that's not what
No, wait, no. Let me ask you this. What would you suggest we do?
Have the board members do their job and make sure that that happens. I mean, if I'm paying,
Come on.
All right, it's a fair question, it's a fair concern. But we're gonna move on, but here's the point. The questions are easy to answer. The answers are always the hardest part of the equation. This board is more intent on collecting as much money as we can than you've probably seen up here in 10 years, I guarantee you that. But for me to be able to tell you every step we're gonna have to take in the next year or months, it's a very nebulous and open-ended question. And all I can assure you is we're doing the best we know how to do, And if you've got suggestions about how we might do it better, write us an email. Give us a suggestion. We're happy to listen.
I just wanted to know if you had a process in place.
Well, we have an accounting system. Let me get to that, because that's a good question too. But let me address that at the beginning of the next part of the meeting, because it's right at the top of that list. It's a good point. Yes, ma'am.
Two-part question. Can we get the QuickBooks in a cash basis too? The profit and loss and balance sheet? in a cash basis too?
I can, but I don't think it's productive, frankly, to produce it for the benefit of the crowd. If everybody wants one, I can
I was
get you
just
one.
curious.
Yeah, you can always produce a cash basis statement.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Mark Soblar, 460 Lake James. Could you just produce a cash flow then? I mean, the website's got income statement, balance sheet, maybe just a cash flow statement?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. One of the internal reports that's on the website quarterly is essentially what you're asking for, but in detail. It basically says, here's our cash balance at the beginning of the quarter. It lists revenue collections. It lists everything by check that was paid out, and then the ending cash balance at the end of the quarter. So that, in a sense, is another way of assessing cash flow versus a true financial statement. Yes, ma'am.
Do you as the board have a sense of what the amount is of outstanding association dues that have not been paid?
Yes, it's right on the balance sheet now. And roughly $14,000 is outstanding at the end of July.
We've collected.
And that number is $10,000 lower than it was at the end of December. We have some persistent, outstandings, and we're going to pursue them. But we do track it. I mean, if the question comes down to how well are you aware of what's owed us, I guarantee you we're going to get real granular on that. Yes, ma'am.
Dave,
Yes.
to address your issue, every time we have a list, there's a list, a database of all the homeowners and all of their neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's from you to ask a question, but there is a lien, there are liens put on properties when people don't pay their dues. There is a lien, we get calls, and I'm sorry, but the realtors and title companies here know that we place liens on people's homes, and that lien has got to be paid before they sell their home.
Yeah.
As long as we have a lien placed and we pay and I forget what the amount is, $15 or $25 a year to place that lien. I think that's what she was going at, Dave. Is
Yeah.
how do we track it, and it is in the database, what people owe.
It's very much being tracked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is being tracked.
There's no question about that part of it.
But my question is, Dave, when we get a bank statement every month, is there a reason why you're not publishing it in the website?
They used to.
Well, okay. To me, if you have a report that shows all the checkbook balance at the beginning of the year, the beginning of the quarter, and all the checks that were written, and all the deposits that were made, and a balance at the end, I do not understand how that's different than a bank statement. In fact, I'll tell you the truth, the bank statement is less accurate. And the reason it's less accurate is because there's outstandings. So if your goal is to understand what went in and what came out, the bank statements are like the second or third best version of that. I don't see a benefit in publishing. I'm happy to share a bank statement with anybody who wants to see it, but that's not going to get anybody better information that's already available. Next. Okay. The financial statements kind of speak for themselves. The only last point I'll make is that on the flip side, the revenue and expenses year to date are measured against a budget that we established. It's a pretty simple budget. So if there's any questions, I guess, after this meeting about these financials, please write me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions at all about the financial statements. But let's close this part of the meeting, if that's okay with everybody.
Motion closed.
Okay. Okay, so here's where we're at. We're going to close the ballots now. And what I'd ask is that anybody who hasn't already dropped their ballot,
up in the box. Let's take 10 minutes and take a 10-minute break and do that, and we will reconvene to go through all sorts of information about where we've been this year so far.